before I introduce Judy. We've talked for a long time. There's been an interest expressed, I think, for a long time about doing some things in general parenting skills. And it's something that's kind of like always, who do you get to do that type of thing? Who's going to set themselves as the authority to talk to other people? And that's, I think, why we've always kind of shied away from it. It's never come to a head to pull together. One thing that we have talked about doing for the last couple of years is an educational choices type of seminar that we wanted to do early in the spring each year, because so many people come to me and say, gee, do you have an opinion about the type of school, or how do you feel about Christian school as opposed to public schools as opposed to homeschooling? And that's always a big thing in the early spring. So that's something that we had tried to pull together a couple times and just weren't able to coordinate in terms of time schedules. So we have looked at different types of things that parents seem to be concerned about in terms of general information. And what was kind of neat was Judy, at the same time that we've been having this discussion, Judy had gone back to school to finish her master's in education, and she was putting together a parenting seminar at the same time. And we probably discussed this for many, many hours over a period of a couple semesters as she was working on this, and she was putting it together as a presentation for the San Juan School District in the fall for different parenting groups. And the more we got talking, we started joking about, oh, well, maybe you could try it out in a church group. And Judy, we don't have to tape it. Lori came. I know. Anyway, so the more we kind of talked about, are there ways that we could change it to make it fit the church situation and be of more interest to hear? And that was an easy thing for Judy to do. And we decided that there were 10 people that we'd feel real pleased that was a big enough group that we could do. And what was kind of amazing was the response that came in from people. So I think it indicates a real interest. This may be just the beginning of different things that we would like to do on an ongoing basis. The emphasis of this seminar this morning is different than others. We're not going to spend a lot of, I'm speaking for Judy, I don't really know what she's going to say. I don't think she's going to spend a lot of time dealing with general child-rearing techniques. The emphasis of this one is confined infancy through elementary grades, and the emphasis is more on intellectual development. We're looking at things that we can do as parents to make a difference in the overall development of our kids. So I'm sure other things will come up. We'd be interested in having your feedback this week and next week to know the types of things in the future if we were to do things or bring people in to do presentations, the type of things that you may be interested in pursuing on an ongoing basis. But just we wanted people to be sure that you were aware of the ages that we were dealing with and the general thrust and focus of this morning's presentation, so that you didn't want to lead anybody astray in terms of the types of things we're going to be doing. So that's why we're here. That's why we happened to pick this focus, where we had somebody who had a format that was together in this area. And so then we invited Judy in. How would you like to try it out here? We decided this was a less hostile group and very close. And I know that she is interested in your feedback, and I think has worked something into next week's presentation where she'd be anxious to hear. I think she's open to discussion. I told her that she needed to be, that if she was willing to do it, that she needed to be open to the types of things that were being said and questions that people might want to have. For those of you who don't know Judy, just let me give you a little bit of background of who she is. Some of you may not know her, besides the fact that she happens to be my sister. Judy has 3 children. Before she went to, let's see, this is going back a long time, Wheaton College and Kent State University with a degree in education, taught in Ohio and New Mexico before she had her kids, taught the spectrum from disadvantaged to gifted children. She has 3 children. She has a daughter, Becky, who is a senior in high school, 17 years old, who is graduating next month from Still Campbell High School. I just found out parents can't say this about their own kids. I think you can say about your nieces. Just found out Becky's graduating valedictorian from her class of 500 Del Campo, so I thought that was kind of neat as an aunt. Then she has a 15-year-old daughter, Laura, who is a sophomore at Del Campo also, and she has a 6th grade son who attends Alex Schweitzer School. All of her kids are in the San Juan district. Her husband, Dave, is here this morning. And after parenting for 18 years, Judy decided that she was looking at the future and was looking at the prospect of having 2 daughters in college at the same time. that it may be worth her while to think about employment again. And if she was going to be doing that, to start thinking in terms of what she would really like to be doing. And she decided going back into the field of education was what she really desired to do. So as her girls were finishing up high school, that's why she went back to school at this point, so that as they moved into those college years, they can stay in college because they can afford to pay the bills, right? So anyway, we're happy to have Judy today. Feel free to interact and ask questions. I promised her that I would shoot her biggest concern about the whole seminar that I was trying to take 30 minutes to introduce her and take up her time. So I'll pass it over to you. That wasn't bad. 5 minutes.
Okay. I wanted to start out with a quote. This is a book I just came across a couple of weeks ago by Cliff Shimmels, who is a Christian, although the books that he writes, there's a couple of them, another one on the back table, are not primarily with a Christian focus, so that they're good for anybody. But I wanted to read one paragraph he says here. It says, "Do you remember when you were young and said such things as, 'When I have children of my own, I will never run them around in circles telling them to get permission to do something from the other parent. I will never give an order without a reason. I will always answer when they ask why. I will never compare a child with his brothers and sisters. I will never tell a child one day that he's too old for irresponsible behavior, then tell him the next day he's too young to be trusted with responsibility.' And then he says, 'Oh well, being a parent is far more humbling than planning to be one. We can't all be perfect.'" And I thought I would start with that because the danger in, which Peggy alluded to, in presenting any kind of a seminar like this is that you come across as an authority. And I want us to all realize that I'm still in this process with all of you. Sherry got here early and said, "Where did you get all this knowledge?" And Dave said, "Trial and error." And that certainly has a lot to do with it. As Peggy said, I have been back in school for a year and will be teaching in the fall and have taught. So I've picked up some things along the way. This was one thing we had to do for a class last year to kind of introduce ourselves. So I thought I had it stuck behind a couch, and when I was looking for something for the kids yesterday for some paper, I found it. So I thought I'd just kind of the introduction. She told us to put together a collage that would tell somebody, it was a new class, tell everybody in the class a little bit about who you were and what you valued. So, I did, and as you can see, these are my 3 kids, and Dave. The car and the car keys. Any of you that have a little older children realize that is where I probably spend 90% of my time or have for the past year, was in the car, taking them from one place to another. Music has been an important kind of backdrop in our family. Dave and I first met each other 20 years ago when he asked me to, I met him in church and he asked me to accompany him for a music festival. And the kids have all played 2 or 3 musical instruments, and so that's been a big part of our life. Sports. Those of you that have elementary age children, or those of you looking forward to it, if they're involved in sports, you will realize that your life will begin to revolve around practice schedules and things like that. And Saturdays will be spent trying to decide whose game you're going to get to see and all those. Education, tennis we play, and of course the Bible and church are where we spend the Bible is our basis for everything, and the church is where we spend a great deal of our time. So that just kind of is a capsule of who I am and where we're coming from, and Peggy introduced our family. I think that that's important because I will refer to some things throughout the day about members of the family. I wasn't going to say this, but just so you have an idea, I think, and Peggy said she has 1 child right now. It's really nice if you're going to talk about children, if you're able to have more than 1 child, because then you realize that God made each of them different, and they come that way in a package, and you're not likely to change the package that they come in. And with our 3 children, our 2 girls, who are almost 2 years apart, are like night and day in personality. Our first one is very strong-willed, and still is an organizer, just a bubbly person, fun to be with. And but has a million things going. She can sit still for about 2 minutes still as a senior, and then she's bored. With our next one, Laura is very content to be with herself. She's quiet. She's kind of a child that if she was the only one I had to raise, I would sit back and think, boy, I have done a marvelous job. But fortunately, God gave me several different types of children, so I realized that I have to depend on Him for a while. And then our son suffers a little bit from having two older sisters that do well in everything that they attempt, and it's taken him a little while to find his place in the world, but he finally has kind of put it together at this stage of his game. So today, as Peggy said, the way that I'm going to structure this is we're going to talk this morning about infancy and preschool, and next week about elementary school. And some things, I know many of you that are looking forward to elementary school or have kids in the primary grades are concerned with if you've chosen to put them in a public school, with that influence in their life, and how do you deal with the school, and how do you interact with teachers when there are problems, things like that. So we're going to, at the beginning of next time, we'll talk a little bit about your options when you look forward to schooling. She said homeschooling, Christian schooling, or public schooling. And then, what do you do once you've made that decision? And the focus will be primarily on public schools, because that's where my kids have been, although most of the principles will apply to whatever situation your child is in. So that's where we're headed. And as Peggy said, if you have any questions, feel free to raise your hand and interrupt or whatever. And then hopefully, if we stay on schedule, we'll have time at the end to discuss some questions that you have in more specific areas. As Peggy said,
I say that one.
yes, you really did. The focus is going to be primarily a little different than some of the others, not so much in how I will be talking next week some about the spiritual development in our children, not this morning particularly, more on how do we develop the potential that our child has, specifically intellectually, also with his creativity side and that type of thing. We know that every child has different potential, and I also am very aware that if every one of us were to put into practice all the principles that one person taught us, every child would turn out differently. They will not all turn out the same, and we wouldn't want them to. But every child does have a great deal of potential, and we can, as parents, make a difference in how that potential is developed. And so we're going to talk about that. I put up here a question for you to think about as you were coming in. What are some of the characteristics that you want to see developed in your child by the age of 12? Now, if you're looking, you've got little bitty ones, and you're looking ahead. I'm not going to talk right now about what do we want to see by the time they get to be adults, because I think we spend a lot of time thinking about that in teaching. But specifically, by the time he's 12, or she's 12, what are some characteristics that you as a parent would like to see developed in them? I just want to see what your thinking is on that.
A good self-image.
Okay, good self-image. I'm just going to write down a few key words here. Okay? That is an extremely important one. And we're going to spend quite a bit of time next week talking about that. Okay, how about something else?
Responsibility.
Responsibility. Another key word. There are times when you don't think you'll ever get there. Okay. Any other ideas?
Or organized.
Organized. Skills of organization. Makes life much simpler in the long run, doesn't it?
The ability to choose good things.
Okay, good. And we might even extend that to just generally say to make good choices, especially friends, but in all areas. Okay.
I am with that as being standalone.
Okay, having that, and that may tie back into the self-image. Stand alone at the times that it's necessary to stand alone, when those times come.
How about sensitivity?
Okay,
To others.
these are all great.
Not self-centered. I don't know.
Okay, thinking of others, I don't know what. Considerate. Okay. And getting the blend between a really good self-image and being considerate of other people, that blend is important.
Love the Lord.
Okay. Right. Love the Lord. Didn't mean to limit you when I said we're going to talk mostly about the intellectual things. That's certainly one of, I think, could have to be the primary thing we would want for our children.
Creativity.
Okay, be creative. Anything else?
Honesty.
Honest. Good. Okay. Great. Some of us, I think, don't, when our kids are 2 and 3 and we're running around trying to keep them bathed and clean and fed, we don't have time to look at the long picture. I think nowadays it's a good idea to just take a minute and do that, see where we're headed and what our goals are. Well, this is great. There are others that we could add to it, I know, lots of others, but this gives you kind of an idea about things where we're headed with our kids, what we would like to make a difference in. And as kind of a background to all of that, I've done a lot of reading in the last year or so on brain development. And it used to be, for a long period of time, that the predominant thinking in educational psychological circles was that what you were born with was it. It was fixed intelligence. And that's what, back as early as the 1920s, that was still the predominant thought. And so however the child came, you couldn't do much to change that. You could enrich things, but it didn't change their innate ability. Today, they don't believe that anymore. With some of the advanced research methods they've come up with, they're finding out that the change in the children's environment and the input they have does, in fact, change their measured intelligence. And I think to understand that, this is a very crude sketch of how we learn. It's not even completely accurate because when we drew it, but it'll help us see, I'll explain what we're talking about here. The brain is composed of a lot of neurons. And in each neuron, there is a cell body, there are these dendrites, which are the sensors that pick up the signals. And then coming off of each one is a long cord, you might call it called an axon. And it's this axon which branches into the dendrite type things at the end that connect with other ones. And right where they connect with each other, what's called a synapse occurs. And that's where, it's kind of like an electrical impulse, as best we can understand it in lay terms. That's where learning takes place. It's when the one makes the connection with the other. Now, what they have, some of the things they've found out through research is that that can be influenced a great deal by what's going on around them. For example, this axon is coated with a fatty substance called myelin. Some of that is produced naturally in the body as you mature. It's produced, when it starts the production, it affects the nerve cells starting with the head down and from the inside out. In other words, with a baby, they get control of their neck and head earlier than they get control of their pants type of thing. So that kind of, it works its way up. But what they have found out through some research they've done with primarily rats is that this level of myelin that's produced acts as more or less a lubricant. Along, we think of a wire being like insulated or not insulated and how quickly the current travels. If this axon is heavily myelinated, then the information travels much quicker. And the interesting thing they've discovered in the last 10 years is that the production of this myelin is influenced by factors such as emotional closeness, such as affection, and those types of things. It influences how much myelin is produced and the speed with which these transfers can take place. Everybody is born with a certain amount of these brain cells, 100 to 200 billion each, they say. And we don't affect the quantity of those brain cells, but we do affect the quality of the brain cells through environment. And many researchers believe that intelligence is actually a function of how quickly these connections are made. And of course, the thing that influences that a lot is how quickly the signals can travel along these axons. And so, if this is true, which they're finding out, then obviously environment plays a very important part in determining the child's ability to learn. See, IQ tests, which you will probably become familiar with if you aren't already, do not measure your capacity to learn. They only measure your performance. And so, you know, because somebody has an IQ of 150 and somebody else has an IQ of 120, does not mean that the one person has more capacity to learn than the other, necessarily. It's just a measure of the performance of what they're already doing. And I think that's important to bear in mind. They found out with some rats that they did, that they took rats all born from the same litter. They separated them. They put one in an enriched environment for rats, with lots of little mazes to run around, other rats to play with, you know, all those types of things. Then they took these other ones and put them in basically, you know, gray boxes alone. And then at the end of the experiment, of course, they studied the brains and found out that the brains of the rats in the enriched environment were in fact heavier than were the other ones because they had expanded all of these cells more. These little dendrites are produced as the need for them becomes apparent. As you need that information or you need to learn something else, then they're produced. They're not just sitting there waiting. And so I think it's kind of important to understand because it does make a difference. You know, if we still believed what they did at the beginning of the century, then I don't know that it would make that much difference what we did. We certainly would want to still produce qualities of, you know, these qualities in our children, but whether or not we could produce any difference, we wouldn't be able to produce any difference according to them in their actual intellectual capabilities. Researchers have found out that environmental interaction can result in a 20-point difference, conservative estimates say, in IQ, in measured IQ. Some think it can result in as much as a 40-point difference in measured IQ. And if you're talking 20 or 30 points on an IQ test, you know that's a tremendous range because the average person's IQ is 100. At 132 in the state of California, they're classified as gifted. At 70, going the other way, they're classified as retarded. So, I mean, when we're talking 30-point spreads or 20-point spreads, we're talking a lot of difference in ability. Some researchers, and again, this is just their opinions based on their research, believe that 85% of the children that are educably retarded, not severely retarded or where they know there's a brain problem involved or lapse of oxygen, not that way, but ones that are just really having difficulty in education. Some of them think that as much as 85% of that is a result of a deprived environment. And again, I don't mean to say that that's always, it certainly isn't. There certainly can be many other causes, and you can do all these wonderful things, and the child may still have difficulty, and that may not be related to anything you're doing at all, because there are some problems that are just there, and you have to work with those problems and adjust to them as best you can. But that's where we, as parents, come into the picture. In light of all this research, we know that we can make a difference in our children's ability to compete with others intellectually, mentally, and like I said, not that they will all be extremely bright children, but they can do better than they would have had we not enriched their environment. I think there are a lot of institutions in our society that do a lot of good things for children, but the family is the best institution as far as providing for individual needs and affection. And it's been interesting in the last year being back in school after this many years. I keep hearing from professionals in the field, non-Christian professionals, how important the family is, and yet they want to downplay that. They can't get around the fact that it's important. Everybody, all the research has shown it's important, but they don't want it to be that important because of what's happening to the family in today's society. They would like to come up with some other explanations for things so that we could collectively feel better about what's happened as far as the family falling apart and say that it's not that important, but they can't do it. And it's been interesting for me to sit back there and with Dobson, listen, you know, as he talks about, that's the key to the whole situation, is that family and the development of it. Terman did some he started doing studies in the 1920s, and he started studying gifted individuals. And he followed for 50 years, his studies were ongoing, because when he started doing those studies in 1920, everybody saw the gifted child as the egghead, couldn't play sports, only sat in the house, that type of a thing. And he decided at Stanford to start these studies, and he found out that, of course, that they didn't fit the image. But one thing that he said is that he observed a lower rate of divorce and separation and a higher rate of parental support and supervision among the parents of the gifted than among the parents of the children of average ability. And this was clear back in, 1930s. He suggested that maybe these factors are crucial in encouraging the child to succeed in school and realize his or her potential. And then another more modern researcher said, and I quote him, "It's entirely possible that the solution to the puzzle of why some brilliant people achieve eminence and others live out mundane lives rests in the familial conditions of their childhood. If this is so, then we might direct much greater attention to the dynamics of the family." And I think what we have to realize is that you as parents and me as a parent, we are our child's first teacher. Whether or not you choose to be, you are your child's first teacher. He is learning from you. Burton White is the man that I will be referring to throughout the day. He's done a lot of studies with children over an extended period of time. And he, too, says that it appears the nuclear family is for most children their first and their most important educational delivery system. He had a team of researchers working under him at Harvard for a 10-year period, and they were trying to find out what affects a well-put-together human being, was how he termed it, as a 6-year-old they were looking at. They went into all different socioeconomic areas, and they started to look at the kids in kindergarten. But they concluded that those kids that were well put together by the age of 6 had the following factors. They were good at problem solving. They had an elaborate command of language. They're both leaders and followers. They're extraordinarily complete social animals. They know how to use adults as resources, and they engage freely in imaginative play with other children. Then they discovered that the children that were going to develop those qualities by the age of 6 already exhibited those qualities by the age of 3, as they started going backwards. So what he did then was withdrew his researchers from the kindergarten and went into the homes. And for 2 years, his researchers visited different homes every other week for 2 years to observe what was going on in the children's lives and that type of thing. And like I said, this was from a completely mixed socioeconomic area and things, so he wasn't looking at bright children or slow children, just all kinds. And he found out that things such as maternal warmth, parental interest, and parental acceptance are closely related to the child's cognitive thinking ability and his emotional functioning. Those were the things that affected it. And the more I read about things like this, the more excited I became as Christians, because we have so much more basis to build on than do some of the other people. Certainly they care about their children, but they don't necessarily have the same basis upon which to build their value systems.
Can you name those 3 things again?
That the kids exist, maternal warmth, parental interest, and parental acceptance. Okay? So the question becomes, what can I do to help my child? Now that we've established the fact that this is important, what do we do about it? And it almost leaves you, or it did me kind of scary. I'm almost glad I didn't know all those things. And realize what an impact we're going to have on the kids. But the thing is, you are going to have an impact, whether or not you realize it or not. So it'd be nice to recognize it and go from that point.
Could you repeat that long list maybe of the qualities?
I'll tell you what, I'll bring it as a handout for you next week. I thought I had it as a handout, and I don't. Most of the things that I'm going to talk about that are in a list form I have available for you in the handout. That would be simple. Okay? Okay, Mary,
Did that study say anything about the stimulating environment such as books and?
yes, we're going to talk about that.
Oh.
Okay? But those 3 factors he found were the ones that had the most effect on it. And if anybody's interested in that, there is a whole book out of all the findings of that study. Okay, now we're going to talk about little bitty ones, the infants. When do you think the parent's role in the education of the child begins? Before they're born? Okay, how so? In what way?
By the feelings you have towards the child and maybe, talking and touching and things like that.
Okay, all right. That's one area, I think we've all accepted the fact that the education that's been done, that nutrition plays an important role. But not too much has been said about the whole emotional and the feeling side of it, which is what she alluded to. And they have found now that that really does make a difference. How you feel about yourself and the baby that you're carrying makes a difference in how that child functions. Now, I don't know, there are some, like I said, in all of these things, and I didn't want to make it technical, there are studies that show these, and I can give you those studies if you're interested in knowing, so it's not just me saying there are some studies that do that, but I didn't want to throw those all in throughout here. But they found that the parents that are genuinely excited about the impending birth can have positive input to the baby before the baby is born. And when you carry that back, it's, again, it's kind of scary because obviously the conditions that affect you as a woman and how you feel about yourself and the baby probably had their roots long ago, before you were pregnant, and your whole, the way you were reared and the way you thought about having children and things like that. So I think it's important that we communicate with young people how exciting it is and how special it is when God blesses you with a baby, and what an exciting time that can be. That's not always done with our teenagers today. Sherry?
Does that make a big difference?
No, it doesn't make a big
Well, it's
difference.
true, but I had a terrible pregnancy with both of them, and I was in a hospital, and...
In fact, what we're going to talk about here is because the other thing is, well, I'll go ahead and say it here, is that a lot has been done with the birth process and how that affects the child. And of course, that's resulted in the Boyer and the Lamont. I'm going to tell you about that. What I'm going to say is that there are a lot of people that really... There's been a lot of, study done on the whole birth process and methods and like we said, Lamaze and that type of thing. I think many times we are really made to feel guilty if we don't opt to go that route, or we don't have the choice to go that route. And the fact is, I read one book called The Magical Child, which I wouldn't recommend. But his theory is that during birth, if possible, only the mother and the baby should be present. That if it's necessary for somebody else to be there, they should leave just as soon as the baby is out, so that the mother can take care of things. And the mother should just continue her routine as quickly as possible. Keep the baby with her 24 hours a day, preferably in a sling across the front where the baby can nurse 50 or 60 times a day. And, for just 2 or 3 minutes. And if you do these things, he maintains, the child will have this much better intellectual focus. As I was reading the book, I thought, this may be, but how does life go on? I think the important thing to realize is these are all, I think there's validity in looking at some of these things, but for most of us, our children are here. And we can't, like I said, we can't go back. Let me tell you my experience with my 3 kids, who are all bright children. My first one was a breech delivery, and I did deliver her breech, but they did have difficulty during delivery. I was put out. She had to have her stomach pumped right after the delivery. And so, that was not an easy delivery for her. The next one was also breech, which they said no, there was no reason for it, it just happened. She was feet first. The delivery went okay. I had a local. The delivery went okay, but she did not have a good APGAR score. She didn't spontaneously start crying and things. She had a low score. They had to get her started. And then my son was great, head first, and it took about an hour for the delivery. And so the point is that we don't have to bemoan the fact that, gee, I didn't feel good about this pregnancy or the delivery, so I guess there's nothing I can do. I think these areas are interesting, and I think they probably do have some influence on those initial responses of the child. Go from where you are.
I was going to say, even more for what the baby goes through, it's more what the parents, a good birth helps the parents attach feelings to the baby more than,
Right.
even if it doesn't happen right then, later on, it can encourage the bond that's going on.
Okay, what is bonding? She said bonding. How would you define the bonding process? That's another word that we've heard a lot about today, the importance of bonding. How would you describe that? Somebody said, what are you talking about? I don't understand what you mean.
Getting to know their smell.
Okay.
I mean, just the real intimate,
Closeness.
closeness of a parent and child.
Okay. Any other ideas?
Talking to them.
Talking to them. Okay, these are results in bonding. That's part of the bonding process.
I thought that was just the beginning of building a relationship.
Okay. Building, just the beginning of that relationship that you're going to build that you hope will extend for a long period of time. Okay.
I think it's the emotional attachment to the child. Most of the time it's the mother in the beginning, and then it's the father to the emotional and physical.
Okay, great. Yeah, because that's the other area that has really come into focus is the importance of bonding. And it's now apparent that newborns are very alert for about an hour after birth, and then they fall into sleep for 3 or 4 hours. So that's one of the reasons they've talked about this hour as being an important time. And like I said, I think if you can take advantage of it, it's wonderful. Not everybody has the option to be able to take advantage of it, and the bonding can occur just as well, I think, at a later point in time. But I think it's good to be aware of these things, like I said, to be educated about them, and to know that this is good and natural and to be promoted, but not to think all is lost if the birth process isn't just smooth or that type of thing. That at the moment of birth, parents would do well to assume that every child that they have, that little baby that you have, is going to be very bright. And I think it's a whole matter of attitude. Studies done by Benjamin Bloom, who is a recognized authority in this field, have shown that children often become what their parents expect them to become. And that if every parent were to treat every child when he was born as if he were a very bright child and respond to him that way, chances are many more of them would develop into bright children than do. And again, always, I want you to know that I know that there is a difference, that not everybody has that same capability. But we need to, there is a danger, I think, in this kind of a process of thinking that you say, I don't want anyone to come away thinking if I do all these things, then my child will be valedictorian, because that certainly is not going to follow. But if we employ these principles and things, our children will do better and be probably brighter than they would have been. So just bear that in mind when I talk about bright children. I won't keep repeating it, but I think I was just really concerned that you understand that I don't expect all children to reach some particular point in their development and intellectually. The single most important thing that you can do as a parent for your infant is to provide and maintain a responsive environment. Many, many studies have been done. Bert White, that was his thing as infants. He believes that infants fail to learn not because they're not bright enough, but because they've not been properly shown how. They haven't been put into an environment where that is encouraged. 90% of all social interaction with a child during the first 2 years of his life takes place during the routine caretaking activities. Giving them baths, feeding them, changing them. 90% of all of the interaction with them takes place during those times. I think when you realize that you have to realize that it's those routine tasks that become your focus area. That's when you need to take time to talk to the baby, to hug the baby, to play with them. You can't say, okay, now he's awake and I'm going to spend 15 minutes providing the stimulus for the baby. Some programs advocate that, and I suppose that's fine, but what I think we really need to take advantage of is the 90% of the time we have where we're just taking care of them and just providing for their needs.
You said during the first 2 years of the life?
The main, I think, within that environment is talking. You need to talk to them from the moment they're born, constantly. And there have been times when I think, I wish I hadn't, because then they wouldn't talk so much. But, a lot of this is just, I was talking with Meredith before, and she said she talked to my mom, who said, throw away the books, just do what comes naturally. A lot of this is what comes naturally. It's what they're finding out now, and I have some handouts of activities that you can do with infants, and what it does, what it results in, what it stimulates, type of thing. It's the activities that your mom probably did, and my mom probably did, without anybody telling them there was a reason to do it. It's what they did naturally as a result of probably seeing their parents do it with infants. So this is not some brand new revelation, it's some idea that has been developed, but the constant talking to them, explaining what's going on around them. Obviously they don't understand what you're saying when they're infants, but it's the flow of words. It's that language they listen to. Speech.
Can I interrupt? I promise, I wouldn't. I just want to make just a point that supports that. I worked for years and years teaching deaf children, young deaf children, younger than age 3. And what we found characteristically with deaf children is that they function, the majority function at a several-year educational delay over hearing children. And often the assumption is because of the hearing loss, that's true, but what we trace back in practicality and research is because of the language deprivation, because the parents didn't know that they were deaf when they're born. And they spend the first 2 years finding that out, and consequently the child spends the first 2 or 2.5 years of his life not hearing language, even if the mother is talking to him, that in most cases that provides a severe enough deprivation that the child never catches up academically. But it's not the hearing loss, it's because of the hearing loss he doesn't get the language stimulation. I just think that point together proves that.
In the environment, the single most important factor is what, would you could say, in the child's environment? Like the single most important factor. It's the mother. Or, I think this is interesting, all the books you read, the educational books will say the mother or primary caretaker. But they will also say, and there certainly is nothing wrong with that, with the primary caretaker, but the qualification they put on it is that the primary caretaker must love the child and have an interest in the child's future. And I think,
Well, I think that's the case in a lot of people. I don't see a lot.
that's, I think, the single most limiting factor in infant daycare is that their interest in that child doesn't extend beyond 5 o'clock. They don't really, they may really care about the child while they have them in his care, but they don't really care what the child is going to be like in 20 years.
Now, is this up to age 2, or is it?
This is, I'm talking about infants, primarily up to about 18 months here. But again, as I read the book, I laughed because they never can say mother, because there are too many mothers that are not there, some by choice, some by necessity. And so we always add the qualification of primary caretaker. And like I said, you can, a grandma that had the infant would probably have those kind of qualifications where she cared about what was going to happen with them. Then we talk about response, and we're just going to take a few more minutes on infancy, then we'll take a quick break, and then we'll come back and talk about preschool. When I'm talking about a responsive environment, the question is about what does that mean? What are you talking about, a responsive environment? Can we stimulate the child too much? Can you overstimulate them? Some of the things when we talk about a responsive environment, are one, just responding, like we're saying, to the baby that drops the toy all the time. You know that the reason, have you ever thought about it? That's probably one of the first times, other than his crying, that he can get a response and begin to feel like he's in control of something. He picks the route, drops the route, he picks the route up, he goes back on the straight, he picks it, he drops it again. And somebody's responding to what he's doing. You know, they can't, other than crying, which again is another thing we need to respond to, that we were talking about how childbearing has gone through all different cycles. There was a period of time when they said, let the baby cry. You know, he needs to cry. And certainly there are still times when you need to let the baby cry. But as just a general rule, to let them cry because they need to cry, that doesn't make sense. They need to be responded to. And sometimes they can get us to respond to exactly the wrong things, but they get responded to, you know. But that, then we talk about colors in the nursery, that type of thing. We talk about, have you ever thought about how really almost absurd it is that we take this baby that has for 9 months heard noises within the mother. They now know that they can hear what's going on. They've been moved around for the most part, unless there are problems. Your routine doesn't change greatly when you're pregnant. But now, one of the gals in my class who is a triathlete, this was a little too extreme. She ran 5 miles, swam 5 miles and ran 10 miles the morning she gave birth. So the point is, the baby has I didn't do that. The baby has been in an environment already where he has heard noises and things. Then we take the baby, he heard his mom's heartbeat the whole time. We take him home and we put him in a bassinet in a quiet room so that he can sleep, so that the noise won't wake him up. You know, and most of us that have more than one, that have 2 or 3, if you have 2 or 3 close, you know that if you bring home that little one and you put him to sleep in a room full of noise, as long as it's not startling, sharp noise, he'll sleep. He doesn't need to be protected in this quiet little place where everything is white and still and safe. He needs the stimulation of being with people. But the infant carriers, which is, in the last 15 years have come about, are really, I think, great, because they allow you to take that baby along while you're doing your regular routine. So they found out that really the responsive environment mainly means just letting the child be in a variety of situations, taking him places, allowing him as he gets older and is crawling about some freedom, not restricting him to that playpen all the time. There's nothing wrong with the playpen if you need to use it. If you need to use it, you need to use it as a parent. But not putting him in the playpen for several hours at a time. He needs to begin to have some protected areas where a room that you've childproof so he can explore the room. The cupboard in the kitchen where he's got all the Tupperware stuff that he can pull out and play with. And there's nothing in there that can hurt him. Lock the other cupboards. But allow them that freedom to explore their environment. I think that we want to protect them, and we obviously have to protect them somewhat, but they have to begin to learn about their environment. Eating some grass and some dirt, things like that, will not hurt them. I think about with our own kids, we lived in a tri-level when 2 of us were born. And we're little. What we did was we blocked off the tall stairs, the 12 or 14 stairs, but we left unblocked the 2 or 3 stairs. And they all fell down, both of them fell down the 2 or 3 stairs about twice. And then they were fine and we could unblock the top stairs, and they handled those. If you're going to have stairs and you don't have the lower stairs, let them explore them. Be there to obviously protect them. We don't want them falling down to the top. But they need to hurt themselves a little bit when they fall. They need to scare themselves a little bit. You can't catch them every time or they won't develop that healthy fear they have to have for it too. But Burton White, that same person I keep referring to, said that he found out that best parents excel at the following functions. They are superb designers and organizers of their child's environment. They allow them freedom, and in order to do that, they have to design that. They're firm disciplinarians while at the same time showing great affection for the children. And that came out over and over and over again, the consistent, firm discipline, but while showing great affection for their children. think, if you don't have that, you have to have those boundaries right from the beginning. And I have to say, I don't want to use too many personal examples, but I think one thing that really brought home to me how important this was is that I think we have a tendency to think that we can do one thing when they're little and another thing as they get older. And if we think about that, we know that doesn't work. But my oldest daughter really brought that home when she was a teenager. Like I said, she was our strong-willed one. She was the one that we battled with all along the way. And largely due to Dave's consistency more than mine, he was able to, and of course it's easier, I think, when you're not with him 24 hours a day, but he was able to keep me consistent because he felt this was such a necessary thing. Well, we hit junior high with her, and we didn't have any problems. We said, thank you, Lord, this is great, we got it licked, And we had been careful about her knowing where the boundaries were, because she is and continues to be the kind of a child that if the boundary is here, she will play right here, right against it, and knock it every now and then to be sure that that boundary is still there. Our other one, if you tell her this is the boundary, then she'll play over here, so that there's no danger in trespassing over it. So I said that you have to work within the child's natural tendencies. Anyway, when she got into high school, her sophomore year, she came to us and wanted to go to the homecoming dance. And for a variety of reasons, which I won't go into, we decided that she couldn't go. And so we, after talking it over, we talked to her and explained that she could. And she got very upset. She went into her room, closed the door, stayed in the room all night. And it was obvious that she was very upset with us. And I think, oh gee, we done the right thing again. She got up the next morning, didn't talk to me. She left for school. And all day long, as we prayed about it, I prayed about it all day, Dave and I talked it over, we decided that, we couldn't keep her from being mad. We could, if that was going to be her attitude, certainly not go out of our way to accommodate her, not take her places that she needed to go and that type of thing. Anyway, as I prayed about it during the day, I was very apprehensive about what was going to happen when she came home that afternoon. She walked in the door, hi, everything was great. And I'm going, I wonder what happened. Nothing was said. She was up a couple hours later upstairs and happened to be on the phone in our bedroom. So I wasn't intruding on private conversation or anything. I was holding some clothes in there. And I heard her say on the telephone, well, I figured it wasn't going to do any good anyway. And so when she hung up, I said, what are you talking about? She said, I went to school today and I told my friends about, you wouldn't let me go, and they said how stupid, they couldn't believe how dumb it was, and that what I should do is for 2 weeks, it was 2 weeks until homecoming, I shouldn't talk to you. I should just, pout and not talk to you guys, and then the next time, you would realize that it wasn't worth the agony of going through this 2-week period. She said, and I thought that over, and I thought, that's really stupid, it's never worked before. And she said, so why should it work now? And that was the end of it. And I said, thank you, Lord, for that vivid lesson, because if it had worked back here when she was 3 and 4 and 7 and 10, then we would have been in for a terrible time when she was 15 and 16 years old. And, I can say that, that was our last big book. We certainly had arguments and things like that, but that was our last major crisis with her. And she's getting ready to graduate now and leave home. I can just really thank the Lord for that principle of consistency, because if you can establish it when they're tiny, those teenage years are going to be so much easier because they'll know what the boundaries are. And obviously they have to be enlarged as the kids get older, and you have to be sensitive to that. But I just really thanked the Lord for that kind of affirmation that it works and that it's good to do. And then I just wanted to say that I have some books on the back table. There's going to be some donuts and orange juice there. We're going to take a short break. One of the books that I have back there is called Honey for a Child's Heart. Some of you are familiar with it, some of you aren't. It's an excellent source of reading material. The author is a Christian. She's been on Dobson's show a couple of times if you happen to catch her. I've had the book for years and years and years. Peggy found it a couple of years ago, was so excited about it, and I said, it's been on the shelf since I think 1972 is the publication date or something. But you start reading to that baby right away. Gladys Hunt is the author. It's available in the Christian bookstores. She takes not just Christian literature, she talks about the importance of reading to them from the time they're tiny, but then in the back she has an extensive bibliography of not just Christian literature, but all literature, and talks about the different books and what's in them. And it's just a really good source of being able to find some books. I just wanted to say, because we're going to talk about it more later, but you cannot start reading to that baby too early. And that has come over and over and over again as we move through the seminar, going to the preschool, the elementary age period. I think the single, we talked about the environmental factors, the single thing you can do is read to them. I mean, you can be there as a mother and be responsible and all that, but reading to the child from the time they can't understand it is very important, okay?
What if, see, Sherry's read both of them, Jason and Summer, and Summer's 18 months younger than Jason. And Jason will want to hear it, and Summer will be off playing in the room somewhere.
That's fine. She's still hearing it. And what's important to the kids is not, and that'll come, she'll come a time when she wants to go.
Well, yeah, now she'll sit there and she'll interrupt the book like that.
What is important is not that they understand what's being read, but again, it's the flow of words. The fact that language has a pattern to it and a sound to it. As they get older, what's being read makes a difference. But when they're little, and Dave, not being in education at all, a mathematician by training, I was telling him this before our first one was born. And I came home one night, and Dave is not an avid reader. But he thought, okay, this is something that we need to do. We need to do this. And he had Becky in her infancy. She was probably 2 months old. And he was reading her Dostoevsky. But I think, we'll take a short break. And, I do want to pass out to you. No, I didn't finish these. I need to talk about this last one. They serve as personal consultants to their children, allowing the children to interrupt them for brief 30-second encounters. And what that does, he's talking about is, and again, as the children get older, they can certainly learn to not interrupt you and things like that. But what he's saying is, when your child comes to you with a question, your little one, they need an answer. And they need it now, and it's probably going to take 10 or 15 seconds to give them an answer. But what they need is to feel responded to, that they're important, that what they have to say is important to you. And generally, you can answer them and go right around. You can't wait till sometime later. You're going to tuck them in bed, and you say to them when they interrupt you, you say, we'll talk about this later. And like I said, as they get older, certainly, you know that.
Is that the quality of time versus quantity?
We have to talk about that, too.
I mean, is that later, or is that referred to the same?
No, that's a question that comes up a lot. The quality of time and the quantity of time. We've all heard that key phrase. And I think some of that is a cop-out. Some of it is true. There certainly is quality time. But the quality time needs to be at the child's direction. I think we see that as the kids get older. We can't decide that, on Tuesday at 3:15, I have an hour to spend quality time with my child. Now, you certainly can program some things in that you have the child look forward to. Right now, Dave's taking our son out for breakfast on Tuesday morning because he's at that age where he's just going to junior high, and he's going through some things and they need to begin to develop a relationship. He talks to me about everything, but not necessarily his dad. So, I mean, you can program some quality time like that. But to say to the child, okay, I've got an hour now, when they want to go play baseball with their friends, is not quality time. And so this 30 seconds can certainly be quality time because it's something that they want to know about. These you can look over during the break. These are some suggestions taken verbatim out of one of the books I have back there on what to do for your infant and what it does. There are enough. I'm not sure I've got them distributed right here. We'll come back here and I'll do the rest. But there are enough for everybody. And as you read through that, we don't have time to go through them together. The thing that I thought was interesting as I kept reading was so many of these things are the way God designed it. When they talk about the infant, it says if you're bottle feeding an infant, to feed him one way one time, another way the next time, because it develops his eye coordination. Now, I mean, if you're breastfeeding, that happens naturally. And there's so many things it talks about with the tiny ones, the importance of feeling bare skin. Again, if you're nursing them, that happens. If you're not nursing them, it can still happen, but you need to develop that. So many of the suggestions in there talks about the peekaboo, where you're playing the peekaboo behind the blanket. There comes a time when the baby, and he wants to straddle, and you take the rattle away, and he forgets about it. If you can't, out of sight, out of mind, he doesn't make the connection that he can still have it. But there comes a time when you put it behind your back and he wants it, but he knows it's behind your back. The peekaboo game is the same thing. He's beginning to anticipate, and that develops that intellectual functioning of anticipation and skill. So anyway, look through those. If you have questions, we can talk about them later, but I thought it was kind of an interesting list because it takes so many of these things that some of us do naturally, some things that we don't, and tells you why they're important, what it is they develop in a child. We're going to take 10 minutes and have some donuts and juice and coffee, and then we'll come back and talk about preschool. Like that, you have to pick up, then you have to leave before that, feel free, but trying to get a lot into this 2 weeks because we didn't want to drag it out. So we're going to spend the next 45 minutes, 40 minutes, 50, whatever, talking about preschoolers. If we can get through this and you have some questions, we'll take a few minutes to talk about those things. The ages from 2 to 4 are the optimum times for learning and expanding language. Agree with that? Peggy felt one of the reasons she started the infant deaf education program in San Juan district was they didn't come into school until 3 ordinarily, and she felt like that they're supposed to be learning language during this time, and they didn't even start school until they were 3, and they were deaf, so they were handicapped in that regard anyway. So she started her program at 18 months to 3, which made a big difference. So for 2 to 4, they're learning their language. This is also the time to kindle an excitement for learning. This is the time when you get that excitement going. You don't worry so much about what you're teaching them. It's just that they're excited about learning. For parents, these can be interesting times. Have the ones that age know. Here are some characteristics I came across of bright preschoolers. They pretty much fit into preschoolers, but I thought these were some of them were particularly interesting. They ask very profound, advanced, or penetrating questions, and they ask them constantly. Any of you that have one like that would swear they never stopped. My mother bought me, when our oldest one was about to assign, I'm trying to think what it said. It said something to the effect that may your great curiosity be rewarded with much knowledge or something like that, because she never stopped talking. And it was always, well, how come and why and why does it happen? And we're supposed to answer those questions.
What happens if you can't answer and you don't know the answer?
Well, what's that?
Sometimes you have to tell them that. Sometimes there's things you can find out together. I remember when I was babysitting Peggy's little boy, when he was 3 or 4, and he asked me about something, and I said, okay, as soon as I finish typing this, we'll, get the encyclopedia out and we'll get to find out. And when I got finished typing it, I said, okay, now, he says, well, I got the encyclopedia, I just can't find the right page. And it was something to do with dogs, I think. So, I mean, we can that. They have excellent memories and an ability to classify and categorize things, put everything in their neat little... I do have this available for a handout for you, so you don't have to copy them now. I can tell you that to start with. Yeah. They have extensive vocabularies. They often like to make up new words to play with language. They may or may not be reading. Some people, I think, get really hung up with the fact that if I'm going to get them started, I really need to be presenting reading to them and get them started reading. Don't worry about it. Some of them will read just because they choose to read and they'll teach themselves. But it's not important that we try to teach them to read. We just need to make them ready to read. If they're ready to read, they'll pick it up so quickly you'll be amazed. They have broad perceptual sensitivity. They take in everything. They'll ask you about something they saw that you didn't see when you were driving down the road. They just take it all in. They have vivid imaginations. They love fantasy and are very creative thinkers. We're going to talk about that a little bit more later, but Sherry was asking about imaginary people. And that's very typical of this age group. Their mind has so many things going on in it, and they often create imaginary friends. At this age, that's fine. Nothing, it probably means they're a creative person. But I know we say, is this okay or not sometimes. They are becoming divergent thinkers. They may come up with several very unusual ways of creating a new object or solving a problem. And that's one of the dangers in buying for them all these little books that we see in the grocery store or at Toys R Us about, learning things. Many of those books focus on convergent thinking. There's one right answer. And when we get to school, see, that's one thing that happens, is we do this convergent thinking where it's either right or wrong. 2 plus 2 is 4. I mean, you can't beat 5. There's only one right answer. But at this age, we really need to develop that divergent thinking in them. Let them come up with, how do you think we could do this? What are the ways we can solve this problem? Let them expand on that. Kevin, they have a sense of humor. They often laugh at things that other people don't think are funny. Do that. They're often easily frustrated. Their fine motor coordination and manual dexterity are often not as advanced as their learning ability. They get frustrated because they have so much up here they want to communicate, and maybe they're in this late preschool period wanting to be able to communicate that, but they can't write it because they can't write good with a pencil, or they can't do little fine things that their mind says, if I could only do this, this would be so pretty.
They want to build a big tower with a block.
They can't.
Mine wants to, but
They don't work. They knock things over. Things like that. I remember with our son, like I said, with the big sisters, he was very artistic, but he shied away from drawing some things. And I picked up on it one day. I gave him a paper and I suggested he draw some animals. He liked to draw animals. And he went to his sister. I heard him go to his sister and say, would you draw a horse for me? And I said, wait a minute, why did you draw a horse? He said, because I can't make it look like I want it to look. And he knew in his mind what he wanted that to look like, but he didn't have the ability to get it down on paper. And the last two are, they often have high energy levels and require less sleep. They demonstrate the interest of more mature children. They may have a longer concentration span. They may be able to think about things for a longer period of time. Okay, these are some characteristics. I said I think most of them apply to any preschoolers. Certainly at this age, some of them you can see applying to ones that are a little brighter than others. But I think at preschool, what we need to remember is that this is the time for development of potential and not for identification of potential. We can get hung up on trying to decide whether or not my child is bright. And it doesn't matter at this point in time. You just develop what is there. They have found in trying to justify some of their gifted education programs that some of the schools have, that the children that preschool teachers have identified as gifted or bright are not necessarily the children that end up being the gifted ones. They have tried tests that they use that they give to little ones, and they found very little relationship between the tests that they take as 2- and 3-year-olds and what their real potential becomes later on. So, we don't need to worry about whether or not this is a bright child. Again, act as if he is, or she is, and develop the potential that's there. And bloom again, was the one I mentioned earlier, that how you treat the child will have a lot to do with what he becomes later on. Another thing they found in the area of brain research now is that everybody, and thinking about children, you learn what you want to learn. Your brain only stores the information that it finds, that it perceives as necessary, interesting. Otherwise, and we've all experienced that. We didn't know there was a basis for it. But if you don't think that something is necessary, you have much harder time retaining that information. It's the same thing with a child. He will learn what is interesting to him. But if it's not interesting to him, he won't learn it. He doesn't have the interest in it, and his brain just says, hey, do I learn that right now? So we need to, again, with this whole idea,
Just asking a question, does that imply sometimes in the way we introduce information to them, that we sit down and try to explain this to them? The child is, you know, climbing the walls, but if we presented that same information to him in something that's more appropriate, he may absorb.
that's right. It has a great deal to do with that. That's what we need to be careful how we present the things and make it interesting to them. The parents will remain a major resource and support for their children during this period of time. If you're going to enroll your child in preschool, that's fine. But bear in mind that you will remain the major resource for the child, not the preschool. And talking about preschool, how many of you have children in preschool now? Okay, or preschool age. Okay, if you have already or are looking for a preschool, you're going to put this little one of yours for the first time, other than Sunday school, you're going to let them go to preschool. What are some things you would look for in a preschool? What are some things that you have looked for when you try to decide where you're going to send them? Okay.
I look for smaller groups of children because not just put in the 30 people at 2 years old.
Okay, so small groupings. Okay.
It's the idea that they're just totally overwhelmed by all these children, and also I feel there's less children and more adults creating more space to be in. They have to get a choice and more interaction.
Okay, good. Some other?
My daughter's been in 2 different environments of the preschool, but something that I found was important is that they have free time, but they also have structured time. In other words, in their free time, they're given lots of choices to do to help you create and
Okay. Okay, good. Yeah.
I think with me, I looked for something, first of all, that would, I wanted a situation that the people there would provide love for my daughter, and so I chose a Christian preschool. And then I wanted something that wasn't so geared to academics. I wanted something that was more geared to learning, but fun. So that this particular school has been criticized a little bit for not being as academic as some of the other ones, but I don't think, for me, it wasn't. I don't think that's the most necessary thing.
Okay.
At this time. They do introduce some of that, but it's not totally geared on academics.
Okay, good.
One thing I really like about Christopher's preschool is that, for instance, in the craft times, they stress the process, not the product.
Good.